We always knew that Joe Biden's EPA would be further on the climate change is dooming humanity side, but we didn't expect them to hide data, real, legitimate data, that disprove their narrative. It's Andy with the Heartland Institute, bringing you more from climaterealism.com. Recently, the EPA brought back the Climate Change Indicators platform under the Biden administration, but this time, there's a whole slew of data missing. By hiding the data, the EPA is misleading the public to prove a narrative that is simply not true. So we're going to look at what the EPA is showing and what the data that they deleted shows and show why this is a false narrative. We're going to start by looking at a graph titled Climate Change Indicators, High and Low Temperatures. Now, the earlier version contained the Dust Bowl, but the newer version seems to suppress that data. But before we check out this data, I just want to mention the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl was between the years of 1930 and 1936 when much of the country was dealing with heat waves. Approximately 5,000 people died from the heat waves during this time, and it's one of the hottest periods in American history. So this is, when we look at these graphs, is going to be a period where you see temperatures were high and heat waves were across the nation. So let's get into it. So this is the earlier version before the Biden administration. To explain how this works, let's look at the y-axis, where it goes 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, etc. A value of 0.2 indicates that up to 20% of the country is experiencing a heat wave, or 10% of the country is experiencing 2 heat waves. Now let's look at the 1930s. We can see that that value rose up to above 1.2. That indicates that much of the country experienced heat waves, and part of the country had more than one heat wave. So while this doesn't indicate that the entire country dealt with a heat wave, it indicates that some areas dealt with multiple heat waves. Now, when we look at modern day, in the 2000s, 2010s, we can see it's not even close to the 1930s. Now let's look at the data that Joe Biden's EPA put out. Here's climate change indicators, high and low temperatures under the Joe Biden era. We can see that they've changed the way this chart works. Instead of showing heat wave index, they're showing percent of land area. So now what they're trying to do is basically show that, oh, look, maybe more of the country is dealing with a heat wave. But if you actually consider the amount of heat waves that the country was dealing with in the 1930s from the heat wave index perspective, it was greatly higher than today. Quickly going back to the old data, we can see that, again, while maybe some of the country is experiencing more heat waves than previously, the actual number of heat waves in the 1930s was greatly higher. The reason they changed this kind of thing is that the old data shows that the 1930s had more heat waves than today, but they don't want you to know that, so they're not going to show that. They're going to show a different way of interpreting the data, which devalues how hot the 1930s was and makes it seem like today is much hotter. Data on heat waves goes back to 1895, but Joe Biden's EPA has decided to put out 4 new charts that start in the 1960s. These charts are heat wave frequency, heat wave duration, heat wave season, and heat wave intensity. Now, by starting in the 1960s, they can hide the whole Dust Bowl period and try to show that there's an increase in the number of heat waves. So when you look at these, it does look like heat waves are getting worse in the United States, but we can see by looking at the heat wave index from previous data that clearly the 1930s had more heat waves than current day. The fact that the heat wave index was above 1 means that either the entire nation dealt with a heat wave, or some areas dealt with so many heat waves that it was greater than that of the entire nation. It's not even close to that today. The reason the Biden administration is hiding data before the 1960s or adjusting the way the data is shown to you is to try to prove the climate narrative that temperatures are getting higher, there's more heat waves, extreme weather events are increasing, and the whole climate alarmism narrative. The fact of the matter is it's not true. When we look at the data in less adjusted means, or when we look at just the heat wave index, we can see that we actually had more heat waves in the past than we're dealing with today. Another thing is we're not having more droughts today than we had in the past. Here, I'll show you one more chart. This is Climate Change Indicators drought. It goes from 1895 to modern day. And you can see that there's no trend line that shows the amount of droughts are increasing in the United States. The fact of the matter is the Biden administration re-released data in new ways and then hid data before 1960 to prove their narrative. And it's disingenuous to the American people to do this, and they're going to try to use your money using this data as proof to spend it in irresponsible ways. So it's up to us to push back, to release the real data, and to show people climate alarmism is incorrect. I hope this was helpful. It's Andy with the Heartland Institute. Till next time. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel and consider donating to the Heartland Institute to support more vibrant free markets, greater individual liberties, and more videos like this one.